Hello and greetings, everyone. I'm Pastor Edwin Strickland, and I serve as the Senior Pastor of Fellowship of Champions Church International, a worldwide ministry helping people to learn to live out their God-given dreams by walking in love and living by faith. And I get to be your host and your guide for this exciting journey that we're about to take that we call EdTalk with Pastor Strick. Hello, and welcome to another season of Ed Talk with Pastor Strick. Can you believe it? Season 3 is finally here. I am super duper excited about what's going to take place in this season. I hope you are too. For those of you that are coming in right now, I appreciate it. Listen, you know what I need you to do. We have been gone for about 60 days. And so I need you to go ahead and help me out with what I call a little social media outreach. That means I need you to help remind your friends, your family, your church members, your people, your co-workers. Let them know that Ed Talk is now live. We are back. We are getting ready to kick off season 3. And it's going to be an amazing time. Listen, while I have been off the last 60 days, I have been digging in and really studying and thinking about what I wanted to be able to share in season 3. And I am telling you, we have 12 amazing episodes, 12 amazing episodes that we're going to share with you between now and the end of May. And you want to set your calendar. You want to set your calendar. You want to set your alarm. You do not want to miss what's going to be happening on season 3 with Ed Talk, because everything we're going to do is going to be designed to set you up for success so that you can move further, faster in 2024. We want you to move further, faster in 2024. And so we've got some practical things that we want to share. Even the way season 3 has been laid out, I've had some people help me to just think about the 12 teachings and what is the best way to lay them out so that you can maximize the knowledge that we're going to share, so that you can synthesize it in such a way that you can put things into practice. And I am telling you, I am excited to be back. So go ahead, tag your friends, tag your family members, let them know that we are live. We are live. We are live. And for those of you who are live, why don't you go ahead and hashtag in the comments and just hashtag the word live. You will know that you are live because you will be seeing the little red box in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. And of course, if you're catching this on replay, I like to know that too. So go ahead and hashtag the word replay in the comment section if you don't see the little red live box in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. As always, there are multiple ways to connect with me for Ed Talk. If you're a YouTube person, you can simply go to www.pastorstrick.com. Very easy to remember. It'll take you directly to my YouTube page. And I hope that you would click like and subscribe to that page. Even leave me a review if something I have said or done has been a blessing to you. Of course, if you're like me, I actually re-listen to my own podcast and other people's podcasts through various podcast platforms. And if that's you, you can go to www.pastorstrickpodcast.com. And when you get to that landing page, you can choose how you want to listen to it. iHeartRadio, Google, Spotify, Apple, whatever platform you enjoy listening to your podcast on, you can find Ed Talk with Pastor Strick there by just going straight to that landing page at www.pastorstrickpodcast.com. And then, of course, I always stream via my personal Facebook page, my professional Facebook page, and even our FOC Church Facebook page. So however you like to interact, however you like to engage, I have tried to make it possible for you to do so. And so I'm super duper excited to be here. Want to remind you that each Tuesday, noon Central Standard Time, unless otherwise stated, I will be back here for season 3, sharing with you what I believe are some necessary tools, some processes, some skills, and even some frameworks in which to take you and your life to the next level. And so we're going to come together every Tuesday, and we're going to dive into spaces of knowledge, spaces of faith, and then talk about real world solutions. I am a practical kind of guy. You know, I love learning new things. I love finding out new processing and frameworks, but I also like to see how that applies to my life. And if that's you, I want you to know that you are in the right place. If you are looking to expand your knowledge base, if you're looking to uplift your soul, if you're looking to grow personally or even professionally, I want you to know EdTalk is the space for you. It is the space for you. And so here's what we're going to be doing in the month of February. Let me go ahead and just lay it out for you so you can go ahead and get your schedule worked out so that you don't have to miss any of this, okay? In the month of February, we're going to embark on what I call a series called Build Better. Build Better. In the month of February, we want to take this time as season 3 kicks off, the first third of the season. We want to kick it off, and we want to talk about how do we build not just our practices, but how do we build ourselves up so that we can become everything God wants us to be. And so in this series, there's going to be 4 singular transformative themes that we're going to talk about each week. Today, we're going to kick off week number 1. And in week number 1, we're going to be talking about how to build better habits. That is today's topic, how to build better habits. We're going to discover some strategies that I believe will enhance your concentration, your productivity, and get you to a place where you can start to see systematic improvements in not just in the way you do things, but actually in who you are as a person. And that is so important because when we talk today about building better habits, we're not just going to be talking about processes. We're going to be talking about how do you work on you so that you get better, so that then by happenstance, your behaviors get better. And when your behaviors get better, your outcomes get better. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, building better habits. And then we'll come back in week 2. And in week 2, we're going to talk about building better focus. We're going to build better habits this week. And then next week, we're going to talk about building better focus. We're going to talk about some strategies. It's going to enhance your ability to execute, to get things done. Most people have great ideas. They have great intentions. They have great zeal. But a lot of people lack what I call the skill of execution. And when you lack the skill of execution, most of the time it can be traced back to a lack of focus because you get distracted by other things. You start to think that the thing you want to do, you can't do. You start to think about all the problems of getting it done. And you go through all of these cycles of things rather than being focused on how to execute what you believe you should be doing. And so in week 2, we're going to talk about how to build better focus. And then week 3, when I told my wife about week 3, she laughed because she said this is going to be a very interesting topic. And she's right. But in week 3, after we've talked about building better habits and building better focus, we're going to come back in week 3 and we're going to talk about building better swagger. I know that sounds funny, but I'm telling you, it's going to be a great teaching. It's going to be a great teaching. Building better swagger. Why? Because I believe that some of you need an adrenaline shot to your confidence. You need a boost in your confidence level. And in this teaching, we're going to talk to you about how you need to learn how to walk into any room and take up space, create presence, and be all that God has called you to be. And it's going to seem a little different than some of the things you've probably seen taught before, but it's going to be a master class on learning how to own the room. And I'm telling you, most of you have not necessarily been systematically taught on how to own the room. Based on your personality, you may do it better than others, but there is a skill set. There is a learned technique in how to be able to take up space, create presence, and be noticed without being arrogant, right? Without being a show off. And we're going to talk about how you do that in week 3. And then in week 4, we're going to finish up February, the last Tuesday in February, talking about building better resilience. You guys know it is difficult for me to teach any series of messages about self-improvement without including a teaching on resilience. Why? Because resilience is all about toughness. Resilience is all about learning how to bounce back from setbacks. Resilience is all about learning how to overcome life's disappointments, and not just overcoming, not just coping with life disappointments, but overcoming them, being better than you were as a result of the thing that happened to you. And so week 4, we'll be talking about how to build better resilience. So I'm telling you right now, you're not going to want to miss this. Today's lessons about building better habits. You're not going to want to miss it. You're not going to want to miss building better focus, building better swagger, or building better resilience, because this is our Build Better series. All right. Listen, I'm super duper excited. So let's get ready. Let's kick it off today. And let's start talking about how to build better habits. Now, let me say this. When we start to talk about building better habits, I don't want to just jump in to the actual processes of the things you do to build a habit, because sometimes I believe that psychologists and other people look at it from a standpoint of operational task. And I don't want to just talk to you about the operational task. We will, but I want to set the stage for this entire series. And I want to set the stage for this teaching about building better habits from the standpoint that if you can build a better you, better habits will be the result of it. Let me say that again. If you can build, right, a better you, if you can get better internally, if you can learn the skills, the tools, processes, and frameworks to become a better you, right? If who you identify with changes, then the natural progression of that is for your behavior to change. So in my sense, it's like this. A lot of times people come to church and we talk to them about their behaviors. We want them to stop cursing. We want them to stop smoking. We want them to stop drinking. We want them to stop sleeping around. We want them to stop stealing. We want them to stop being mean. And we want them to stop gossiping. And we focus on the behaviors before we ever focus on the person. And so what we're going to do is flip that script. I want to focus on who you are as an individual. And by focusing on who you are as an individual and fixing the inside first, and then giving you a framework for the behaviors, for the processes of making the habits a habit, then I think you're going to get a lot more latitude with that. I think you're going to go a lot further, a lot more progression. All right. And so then let's begin then to talk about building better habits. I believe the first thing we have to talk about, if we're going to talk about building better habits, is the actual role of identity in habit formation and change, right? There's a role that your identity plays if you're going to build better habits and if you're going to make changes to daily routines, the way you think, the way you process, the way you perceive the world, the way you interact with circumstances and situations. Hear me when I say this. The habits that you and I adopt, they are not just outcomes of the behaviors that we perform, but they are also an expression of our identity, aka who we really are. Let me say that again. The habits that you and I adopt, the things that we do, the habits that we embrace, they are not just outcomes of our behaviors. They are outcomes of our behaviors, but it's deeper than that. What it is they're actually expressions of our identity or who we actually really are. In essence, every action that you take is a vote for the type of person you want to become. Somebody put that in the comment section. Say, every action I take is a vote for the type of person I wish to become. I'll say it again. Every action you take, every action Edwin takes, right? It's not just a result of my outcome. It's actually an expression of who I am. And because it's an expression of who I am, it's actually a vote of the type of person that I want to become because my actions reinforce who I am. Now, when you begin to understand and when you begin to embrace this type of thinking, this perspective will shift you. And here's that word again, it's shifting you. It will shift you and your focus from what you want to achieve to who you wish to become. Hear me when I say this. I'm talking to you this afternoon about who you want to be, right? Who do you want to become, not just what you want to achieve. So many people, when they talk about habit formation and when they talk about change, they talk about it from the standpoint of what are your goals? What are your dreams? What are your desires? How much money do you want to make? Where do you want to live? Where do you want to send your kids to school? Who do you want to be in the community? And all of the habits are focused in on what you want to achieve. I'm telling you, it's got to be greater than that. It has to be greater than what you want to achieve. It needs to go to the depth of who do you want to become. Because if you can change and if you can get to the grassroots of who you want to become, your behaviors to be that will be an outgrowth. It won't be something that you're struggling to do. It won't be like, and you have to forgive me, I'm a school teacher, right? By trade. My first college degree is a degree in elementary education. So I have been formally trained to be a teacher. And when I was teaching my younger students how to do math, one of the things I never liked to do was to teach them these little nuances, right? Most of you, when you learned how to do double or triple digit addition, okay? I can almost guarantee you, if you're over the age of 30 and you're listening to me, they taught you that you started adding on the right-hand side of the three-digit number, right? If you had 100 plus 105, okay? They told you to add the 0 and the 5, okay? Or if you had 101 plus 109, they said you add the 9 and the 1 and you get a 10. Most of you were taught to put the 0 down and carry the 1. That was the language we used. What teachers weren't teaching kids is the idea of place value. They weren't saying that that number on the far right side represented the ones, okay? When you were carrying, you weren't actually carrying a 1, you were carrying a set of 10, okay? And then when you had to do it again, you weren't carrying another 1, you was carrying a 100, okay? What they do now is they actually teach kids to understand number sense. And that's why some parents have a difficult time teaching their kids how to do math, because all the parents know is nuance, all right? And that's why y'all need to be hiring Ivy if your kids are struggling, because she's a math teacher and she can help you. Shout out to Ivy. Now, let me just say this. What I want to do is I don't want to teach you a nuance about changing your behavior. I want to teach you how to understand who you are and who you would like to become. Because if I teach you that, then the behavior piece is easy. All right? The behavior piece is easy. So let me say this again. I want us to shift our focus from what we want to achieve to who we want to become. Because if we do that, we will make habit formation an integral part of our identity development. Amen? Now, the process of habit change always begins with the identity you want to adopt. If you read material and they do not talk about role identity, you can probably go ahead and close that book, because that book is probably going to be based on a bunch of nuances to get you to form a habit. But if it's not who you are, it won't be sustained. Okay? So the process of habit change begins with the identity you want to adopt. So in essence, what I'm telling you is that instead of focusing on what you want to do, instead of having an outcomes-based habit mentality, you need to start considering, who do you want to become? which would be an identity-based habit, okay? I want you to have an identity-based habit formation process rather than simply an outcomes-based habit process. Why? Because this approach involves asking yourself a series of questions. And the more you ask yourself questions, the better you get to understand yourself. Think about it like this. Have you ever done something and then asked yourself, why in the world, come on somebody, did I do that? Why did I do that? You don't know why you did it. You did it out of habit. But if you knew who you were, then you would understand why you did it. And then it's much easier to make the change to either continue to do it or to change doing it. See, when you approach things like this, you begin to ask yourself questions like this. What would a healthy person eat? What would a wealthy person do in this situation? How would a productive or successful person start their day? See, when you begin to ask those kind of questions, it helps to form your identity. Once you form your identity and you ask yourself questions like, do the most successful people I know, do the most wealthiest people I know, do they spend copious hours watching television or scrolling on social media? It's a question you ask yourself. And if you find out that the most successful people that you know, the richest people that you know, they do not spend copious amounts of time on social media, and I'm not talking about building a business just on social media, arguing with people on TikTok aimlessly for hours. If they're not spending their time doing that, then you now say, okay, I want to be like them. And if I want to be like them, then my behavior must change. Because now I've changed my identity from being like somebody else to being like who I want to become. Stick with me. Habits, understand, are an evidence of your identity. Somebody type this in the comments if you're watching this live. Say, what I do tells the world who I am. What I do tells the world who I am. What I do tells the world who I am. Why? Because my habits are an evidence of my identity. Every single time you perform a habit that aligns with your desired identity, what you are doing is reinforcing that identity. For example, if you see yourself as a reader and you read every single night, you are not just reading. What you're actually doing is embodying the identity of someone who is a reader. It's the reason we tell people all the time, if you want to stop smoking, the first thing you have to do is identify yourself as a non-smoker. Once you begin to identify yourself as a non-smoker, then getting away from the habit of smoking becomes much more pliable for you. Understand, every habit performed, every time you perform a habit that is in alignment with the identity that you want to become, it serves as evidence to reinforce who you are. But the converse of that is true. If you say, I want to be a wealthy person, that's what you're saying. But if your habits align with you being a person who is broke, a person who doesn't budget, a person who doesn't consult God in their spending, a person who is not generous, if all of your behaviors line up with that, even though you say you want to be something different, your habits are reinforcing that you are broke, that you are stingy, that you don't manage, that you don't budget, and that you don't consult God in your finances. No matter what you say out of your mouth, your habits serve as a reinforcement tool for who you want to become. And so if we're going to build better habits, this is foundational to what we need to first understand. Now, initially, there might be a disconnect between your current habits and the identity you wish to adopt. Okay? There may be right now a disconnect. What do I mean? I mean, you really want to be a generous person, but you've been stingy the last 40 years. So right now there's a disconnect between your habit of being stingy and the person you want to become, which is a generous person. However, as you start practicing new habits, your self-image begins to change. Somebody type this in the comment. Say, as I practice new habits, who I become changes. As I practice new habits, who I become changes. Hear me loud and clear this afternoon. You are not just trying to change your behavior. This teaching is not designed just to get you to change your behavior. This teaching, or the goal or the aim, is to change your understanding of yourself and why you do what you do. In other words, let me say it like this. Behavior change will not always lead to identity change, but identity change will always lead to behavior change. You understand that? Just because you change a behavior, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to become what you're doing. Okay? We see people who do that all the time, but it is almost impossible for you to change who you are and not change what you do. Because when you adopt a new identity, your behaviors start to align naturally with that identity. If you truly believe that you are a healthy individual, you will actually begin to prefer healthier food options. You will begin to prefer activities that support this belief. Listen, before I started my health journey, and I do not call it a weight loss journey, I have lost weight as a result. But when I started my health journey on August the 1st, the things I used to enjoy eating, the things I used to enjoy doing, I didn't automatically stop enjoying eating those things. I didn't automatically stop liking those things. But as I identified with a healthier version of myself, I started doing more of the things that align to the healthier version of myself. What do I mean? I started walking when it was hot, when it was mild, even when it was cold. The foods I started eating changed. I started eating more vegetables. I cut meat out for 60 days. I got rid of sugar. I got rid of bread. I got rid of pasta. I started moving my body more. I started drinking more water. I cut out sodas. Why? Because I was identifying, come on, somebody, I was identifying with the new me. And as you identify with the new you, the things that you do will be new. Amen? Now, let's talk real quick just about some strategies for leveraging identity in habit formation, because there are strategies. You know, I'm a teacher, so I got to talk about the strategies because I believe strategies actually help us. Listen, if you want to develop strategies that will help you leverage, right? Leverage new identity development as it pertains to creating new habits, right? Here's what you have to do. Number one, you have to choose habits that match your desired identity. You have to choose habits that match your desired identity. You have to start by defining who you want to be. And then you break down this identity into specific habits that embody this persona. Who do you want to be? You don't have to ask even your friends or family. It's an internal question. Who do you want to be? If I'm going to become somebody new, I need to know who that is first. So the first thing I have to do, the first strategy I have to embrace, if I'm going to leverage this new identity process in order to form these new habits in my life, I have to define who I want to be. For instance, let's say you want to be a writer. Well, what do writers do? Come on, somebody. Writers write. It's like I tell all the time the people in my church, you say you're a believer, then what do believers do? Believers believe. And so if you say, I want to be a writer, but you don't ever pick up your pen and pad, if you don't ever go to your computer, if you don't ever do anything saying you want to be a writer, your actions aren't lining up. And so if you say, hey, I want to be a writer, what are some things you can do? You can begin to write regularly. So your habit may be, right? My new habit formation may be that I commit to write 500 words a day. My daughter is attending Oral Roberts University in the city of Tulsa, Oklahoma. She is majoring in writing. And when she was home over the semester break, I said to her, you read a lot of stories, but if you want to be a writer, you got to start writing more. I know you write some stories, but you're reading more than you're writing. And because you're reading more than you're writing, you're really identifying more with being a reader than a writer. And so we talked about what is going to be her commitment to becoming the person she says she identifies as, which is a writer. Well, her commitment is to write a short story at least once a week. In order to do that, that means she has to write a little bit every day. So number one, if you're going to develop a new habit, you got to choose, right, who you want to become and then develop a habit that matches it. Number two, the second thing you need to do is you need to learn to celebrate behaviors that align with your identity. In other words, every time you perform a habit that reinforces your new desired identity, take a moment, pause and acknowledge it. Pause and acknowledge it. I said to Jordan, I said, hey, the first week may be tough because it's not something you've done before, but write a little bit of something every day. And when you get to the end of that week, I don't care if it's not but 500 words or 1,000 words, even if the story is not complete, celebrate the fact that you made a commitment and then did the thing necessary in order to become who you said you are. That's the question you can ask yourself today. Even if we don't even get through all of this today, you can ask yourself, am I doing the thing that would reinforce who I say I want to be? Because that's the thing you need to do first, and then develop that behavior and then celebrate it as you go. So you got to ask the question, who do I want to be? Okay. And then I have to start doing the thing that aligns to that. The second thing I have to do is give myself some grace and celebrate my journey. I got to celebrate along the way. Why do I want to celebrate along the way? Because when I take a moment to recognize my new habit, it begins to solidify for me my identity, and it makes the habit more meaningful, which means I get more satisfied by doing it. And the more satisfied I get by doing it, the more I'll do it. Okay. And then the third thing you have to do, because we're talking about what are the 3 strategies that we have to leverage in order to help us develop the new identity, so that once we develop the new identity, the behavior part becomes much easier. The third thing we have to do is we have to use identity to overcome challenges. We have to use our new identity to overcome challenges. When you are faced with challenges, or when you are faced with temptations or opportunities in which to give up, cave in, or quit, you have to ask yourself this question. And if you need to write it down, write it down. You have to ask yourself, what would someone with my desired identity do in this situation? What would someone with my desired identity do in this situation? One of the things you'll hear me say often, and my wife says it often as well, is that success leaves clues. Sometimes you have to find a role model who you don't even know. You might have to find a role model in a book. You might have to find a role model through a magazine article. You might have to find a role model through social media, on television. Maybe it's not even somebody you can touch, but you have to ask yourself, what would someone who has the identical same desired identity that I want to have, what would they do in this situation? That is the reason that Kobe Bryant used to get so irritated by even other professional basketball players. Let me help you. Kobe felt like he always had the ability to become better. Kobe identified, whether you like him or not, as a winner. Kobe would score 50 points and ask himself the question, what would someone do if they wanted to consistently score 55 points? And then he would find people who had consistently done what he wanted to do. He would study them. He would identify with them and adopt those kind of behaviors. So when he had teammates who said they wanted to be the best players in the world, but yet they came into training camp overweight, they didn't stay after the game to practice. They didn't show up early at the gym and put in practice that wasn't required. When they partied all night and they didn't eat the right foods and didn't do the right exercises, it bothered him. Why? Because for him, he heard them saying they wanted to be something, but their behaviors didn't line up to who they wanted to be. And so then when they were faced with certain challenges, they weren't able to overcome it. Kobe understood that he had to use his identity to overcome challenges. So he would ask himself, what would someone with this chosen identity that I want to have, what would they do in this situation? Why is that such a powerful question? Because the reframing of that question can help guide your decisions and behaviors in challenging times, in those challenging moments that we are then assured that life are going to throw at us. Because if one thing life is going to do, life is going to life, right? Life is going to life. So now that we've spent our time talking about this, now I can throw at you, right, a couple of processes, a couple of things that you need to do in order to develop this new habit, okay? So let's talk about this idea of understanding what's known as atomic habits. I did not make up the word atomic habits, but there is a book out there by a gentleman by the name of James Clear, and he wrote a book called Atomic Habits. I have I don't make any money if you read the book or anything, but it's a good book. It's a good book about processes, okay? I wanted to talk to you about changing your identity first, but as you begin to understand that part, then you can get into some of the things that he talks in here about atomic habits, right? Because one of the things that he does, and I read his book, and interesting enough, the book actually encapsulates his philosophy about making small incremental adjustments that help us change what we can do, okay? I wish he dealt more with the identity piece because I believe that most people walk away from a book like Understanding Atomic Habits and they run off to implement these things. But the problem is it has no sustainability because they do not connect this idea of changing who I am inside so it matches on the outside. They're trying to change the outside and hoping that the outside will be enough, not understanding that who you are will ultimately always outweigh what you do, okay? But let's talk a little bit about what he defines in the book. In the book, he defines atomic habits, and he says that they are small incremental changes that we make in our lives that though they are seemingly insignificant on their own, they serve as a powerful force for personal transformation. I do not disagree with that. When we begin to talk about habits, some people want to change the world. They want to change everything about them at one time. But even if you think about how they build a house, they don't build a house in one step. There's process, and I don't care how small or how big the house is, there are processes to building that house. One of the first things they have to do is they have to lay a foundation. Well, even before they can lay a foundation, they have to do what's called site preparation, right? And even before site preparation, you have to do plans of what that site preparation is going to be. Some of you get frustrated because you want to change everything about your life at one time. And maybe you do have 1,000 things you need to change. But what James Clear says is that if you can adopt this attitude of atomic habits, this idea of changing one thing at a time, that even though it may seem insignificant to change this one little thing, that they will have what's known as an aggregate or compounding effect on your life. Okay. And if you do that, over time, you will see the compilation of all of these small changes, which have aggregated to help you become the new you. Again, it begins with you understanding who do you want to be, mapping out who you want to be. Now, when we begin to talk about this idea of atomic habits, there's a core principle for why he uses the word atomic. And I think it's important to note before I get back to my notes. He talks about atomic because what he says is that these atomic habits don't necessarily produce immediate results, but what they do produce are long-term outcomes that generate through a compounding effect. And he uses the word atomic because they're small. Okay, this idea that atoms are like building blocks. We all know, we've been to school, we all matriculated, we understand that everything that we can see and touch and is made up of matter. Okay, and that matter is made up of millions, billions, trillions of atoms. And when those atoms come together that you can't even see with the naked eye, that as they come together, they form something that you can see. And so that is the idea behind this concept of atomic habits. It says that if we can implement them, that we can make marginal gains in a tiny positive way. And that when we aggregate them together with other small improvements, that it leads to significant enhancement and a competitive advantage. That's why we're starting off season 3. We're talking about building better habits, because we want to build from here to talk about building better focus and execution next week. And then we're going to talk about how to build better swagger so that when we show up in various spaces, we bring that focus and we bring those habits with us. And then we're going to finish up the series by talking about building better resilience, because even the best laid plans don't always come out exactly the way we plan. And so James Clear talks about this, and he gives an example, if you read the book, about the British cycling team. For those of you who read the book, you'll know what I'm talking about. For those of you who haven't, spoiler alert, okay? But he talks about this British cycling team who had seemingly for years underperformed, okay? They had the talent. It seemed like they should have been doing much better as a team, but they kept underperforming. They were mediocre. They were mediocre at best, right? They had a lack of any significant victories, and they just couldn't figure it out. And so what they did back in 2003, I believe it was, they hired a performance coach. And what he did is he did not come in and change the roster. He didn't come in and change their bicycles. He didn't come in and change their equipment. He didn't radically change their training regimen, right? What he did is he made a series of strategic but small improvements in everything they did, related to their cycling, to their equipment, to their practice, to their nutrition, even to their sleep patterns. There's very insignificant things that you would not think would have an impact on anything, except when you aggregate them together, they had a profound effect. And in fact, the meticulous attention to detail that he gave caused this aggregation that caused him to have unprecedented success. That's what I'm hoping for you. I'm hoping that you'll begin to think about, who do you want to become? Who do you want to be? And as you're doing that, you'll begin to make these small changes that may seem insignificant when you make them, but after you've made them over a serious time, they begin to have this unprecedented impact on your life. And so one of the questions that I'll ask you, because this is a podcast and part of my podcast is about knowledge and information and sharing and getting you to grow, I want you to think about, based on what you've heard so far, here's number one. Who do you want to be? Okay, so if you ain't got to answer right now, but you can jot this down on a piece of paper. Ask yourself the question, who do you want to be? Don't start with what do you want to achieve. Start with who do you want to be? Answer that question. And then once you've answered that question, ask the next question. What would someone with this identity do on a daily basis? You say, I want to be a healthy person. What would a healthy person do on a daily basis? Not consume 3 or 4 sodas a day. Am I consuming 3 or 4 sodas a day? I am. Then that behavior doesn't line up with who I want to be. So now I know a behavior that I need to change. But I'm changing that behavior not as just an outcome. I'm changing that behavior as a result of who I want to be, which is much more powerful and much more sustainable. Okay? Now, let's talk a little bit then about the science of habit formation, because there is a science to habit formation. The habit formation process can, in essence, be broken down into 4 distinct parts. Again, James Clear in his book talks about this. You'll find other people who have talked about this. They call them different things. They call them different names. But even after I give them to you, you can change the names of them if you want to. I don't care about the names. The process, the framework is what you need to understand and know how to work it. Because when we talk about the science of habit formation, if it's truly a science, it will have something called test and retest reliability. What do I mean by test and retest reliability? It means that if this thing actually works, as a black man, I can do it. As a white man, you can do it. As a black woman, Hispanic woman, Asian woman, you could do it. A white woman could do it. Someone who's tall could do it. Someone who's short could do it. Someone who doesn't live in America could do it. Someone who lives on another continent could do it. It would have test, retest, reliability if it's truly a science. If it doesn't, it may be more of an art form, which means you have to have some specialized talent or skill in order for it to work. The good news about habit formation is that it actually is a science, okay? And so here are the 4 habit formation cues or processes, okay? The habit formation process can be broken down into these 4 distinct parts. Number 1, something known as the cue, C-U-E. There has to be a cue. After there's a cue, then there needs to be what's called the craving or the craving process. It's the cue process, the craving, some people say the desiring process. And then there's something called the response process. And then it's the reward process. This cycle, cue, craving, response, and reward. I'll leave that up there in case you want to write them down. This cycle not only explains how habits are formed, but they also tell us how they can be changed and reinforced. Okay? It's not just about how we form the habit. It's about how do we get rid of the bad ones that we already have? And then how do we reinforce the good ones that we're trying to get into? Understanding this model is absolutely crucial for anyone, and I do mean anyone looking to build new habits, or if you're looking to break some old habits. And the truth of the matter is, if you make the decision you want to become something different than who you are, you will need to break bad habits. In fact, go ahead and and everybody who's on here live, it's about 50 of you, you can put this in the comment section, whether you're on YouTube or Facebook. Say it's okay to break up with bad habits. Give yourself permission. Go ahead and say that. Let your ear gate hear it. Let your eye gate see it. Go ahead and be tactical in typing it out, and go ahead and repeat. It's okay. And then you can even say your name. It's okay, Ivy. It's okay, Shavandra. It's okay, Tanitria. It's okay, Shun. It's okay, Crystal. It's okay, Edwin. It's okay, Douglas. It is okay to break up with bad habits. Even if those bad habits seems like they've been serving me. What do I mean? Well, I just got a quick temper. People like, I just got a quick temper. It's just who I am. Well, okay, that quick temper may serve to protect you from people, but what does it cost you? Ask yourself the question, what has this habit that I think serves me, what has it cost me? And as a result, do I want to keep it? Because if I keep it, it's going to reinforce the old me rather than the new me. And that is the reason that I am such a stickler on identity development. I believe in process. I believe in frameworks. I believe in these processes I'm showing you on my screen, the process of cueing, the process of craving, responding, and reward. But you gotta dig deep. You gotta know who you are and who you want to become in order to develop the right habits. Because wrong habits don't produce the right person. But the right person almost always has the right habits. So let's go through these really quick before I get out of here. Let's talk about number one. When we talk about cueing, right? So step number one, when we talk about the cueing process, what does cueing do? A cue is simply a trigger, okay? We all hear this term all the time. I was triggered. They were triggered. Somebody got triggered, okay? That's all a cue is. A cue is a trigger. What it does is it triggers your brain to initiate a particular behavior. It is a bit of information that is processed through your neurological system that predicts a reward if you do something. Cues can be anything from a visual trigger, it can be a time of day, it can be an emotional state, or even a particular location. For example, let's say that your new identity is you say to yourself, I am going to become a runner. Okay? I am going to become a runner. A cue you might use is to put your running shoes by the front door. Why? Because every time you see those shoes when you're going out the front door, that cue is going to act as a trigger and remind you of who you said you want to become. This is the reason that people buy exercise equipment. They use it for a little while and then they start throwing their clothes over it. They put their clothes over their Peloton. They put their clothes over their treadmill. They start to put other things around it so they can't get to it. They start to hide their workout equipment. They put their weights over in the corner. Why? Because what they're doing is trying to remove the cue that tells them, I need to be using this Peloton. I need to be using this treadmill. I need to pick up these weights. And so if you're going to form a new habit that's going to reinforce and match who you say you want to become, you must initiate cues. You must have triggers, those things that help you to become who you say you want to be. The second thing is what they call craving. Okay, what are craving? The craving process. Cravings are simply the motivational force behind the habit. What's your reason for the habit? We said we wanted to become a runner, right? So we took our running shoes and instead of having them upstairs in the back of our closet, we take those running shoes, we bring them downstairs, we put them by the front door. At least when we see them, we know why they're down there. Now, you may not automatically start running that day, right? But that cue is there. It's working on your subconscious. Every time you see, you're like, why are these running shoes down here? Oh, that's right. I said I'm a runner. Man, I need to go run. You might find an excuse not to do it, but at least the cue was there. The cue is the starting point, which is why you have to move beyond the cue to what's called the craving. Because without some level of desire or some craving to do what the behavior is calling you to do, then you have no reason to act on it. Because in reality, you can leave those running shoes by that door for a month and never run. You like, oh yeah, I need to run. I see them. Oh yeah, I need to run. I see them. Man, them shoes been sitting down there. Man, I need to get the cobweb off these shoes. They've been sitting down there for a long time because you set up the cue, but did you develop the craving? Because the craving is the motivational force behind the habit. And without some level of desire, without creating some craving, then you have no reason to do it. Now, hear me. Cravings differ from person to person based on their goals and experiences. I am going to use my craving, all right, that helped me launch my health journey. And again, I don't call it a weight loss journey, even though I've lost weight. My cue was, I am getting ready to start going on vacation with my wife because our kids are going to all be in college 1 year from when I started this health journey. Okay. I started August the 1st of 2023. August of 2024, my youngest daughter is going to go to college. Okay. That was my cue. My cue was her senior year. Every day was one less day that she was going to be in high school. That was my cue that I needed to look different. I needed to be healthier. Okay. Here was my craving. I started looking at myself naked in the mirror. Okay. Now, I ain't trying to put no images in nobody's mind, but I got to give you the understanding. All right. I apologize. But my craving was, do you want to look like that? Or do you want to look like something else? I have an image in my head of what I want to look like, and it's not currently lining up with what I see when I walk by this mirror. And so my craving, my motivation was that I got to eat better, I got to move my body, and I got to do the right things because I want this new identity I have to be lined up with what I see. But your craving may be different. Your craving may be based on your goal. Your craving may be based on what you want to accomplish. It may be based on what you want to do, but you need a craving. You need a why. So I told you earlier, ask yourself the question, who do you want to become? Ask yourself, what's the why? What's your why? Why do you want to become it? And then what is the why for what you're willing to do to stay there? So I got to have a cue. I got to have a craving because the craving is my motivational force. And then number 3, what's going to be your response? Okay. You put the shoes by the door. Okay. You know you're going to need your summer body here in about 4 or 5 months. Okay. Your mirror currently tells you you are in winter mode. You are not in summer mode. All right. You are in winter mode and you want to get out of winter mode and you want to get past spring mode into summer mode. So that is your craving. That is your why. Okay. But now what's going to be the response? The response has to do with the actual habit itself, which can be a thought or an action, but it needs to be something that you actually do. Whether the response occurs, it's going to depend on how motivated you are and how much friction is associated with the behavior. My God, let me say that again. Whether your response actually occurs or not, it's going to depend, watch this, so much on your internal motivation and how much friction is associated with the behavior. Hear me when I say this. Most people do not change until the pain of remaining the same has become greater than the pain of changing. Let's take a Selah moment, because I really want you to hear me. Most people do not change almost anything in their life until the pain of remaining the same, okay, becomes greater than the pain of changing. I've seen people and I've known people who went to the doctor and the doctor told them that if they didn't do X, Y, and Z, they wouldn't have but a few years to live. And they still didn't change. They have some catastrophic event happen in their life, and then they were in the hospital and they almost died. Now they're willing to do what the doctor said. Why? Because that pain point that was associated with staying the same, it's now greater than doing what the doctor told them to do. And I'm saying to you that you don't have to get into that state. You can develop a response state. You can say, I put my shoes by the front door. I want to have my summer body. My response is that I made a commitment to myself and I will not I will not renege on that commitment to myself. I will not. I will not renege on the commitment to myself. That's my motivating factor. I ain't gonna lie to me. I ain't gonna lie to me. I'm done lying to me. That's my new identity. I'm not a liar to myself anymore. So if I'm not a liar to myself, I need a behavior that matches that. Okay, if I say I'm going to become a runner, I go upstairs and I get my running shoes and I put them by the front door. That's my cue. Okay, I keep looking at myself in that mirror. I weigh myself. I check my blood pressure. I check my A1C. I check everything to make sure that I am progressing in the right direction. If those numbers aren't where I want to be, then that ought to be my craving to get those numbers to where I want to be. And then what's my response? I'm not a liar. I don't lie to me. So even though I may not be able to run but 1 block today, I'm going to do some running. And then by next week, maybe I can run 2 blocks. And then maybe a month from now, I'll be able to get half a mile. And in a month after that, I get a 2 mile. Before you know it, I'm doing my first 5K. Okay? Whatever your goal is, you have to be working toward it. It has to be the response. And then number 4, because this is a four-part process, right? That's right, Crystal. Got to stop lying. We got to stop lying to ourselves. That's right, Angela. We got to stop that. We cannot renege on our commitment to. In fact, somebody else needs to type that in the comment section. I know we're right at an hour, but you need to type that in the comment section. Say, I will not renege on my commitment to myself. That's one of the greatest habits you can form. Form the habit of not lying to yourself and form the habit of not reneging or cheating yourself out of greatness. All right. And then number 4, because this is the process, right? This happens like this. It's part of my neural pathway. It's happening quick. It's happening like this. It's happening really fast. I got a cue. I understand it after my cue. Then I got to go to my craving. After my craving, then I got to have my response. And my response is so important. My response is so important. And then after our response, here's the last thing, the reward. I have to learn to reward myself. Why? Because rewards are the end goal of every habit. Me having better health is the reward of me beginning my health journey. Losing weight, getting my BMI under control, getting my cholesterol under control, getting my blood pressure under control, not having diabetes, even the improvement of my eyesight, all of those things are a result of this journey, but the reward is better health because that's why I started the journey. Okay? Rewards satisfy your craving and ensure that the habit loop is a worthwhile endeavor and will continue. The habit loop. What's the habit loop? Cue, craving, response, reward. Cue, craving, response, reward. Cue, craving, response, reward. What I am doing is developing this neurological habit loop. And I'm telling myself, my new self, this is a worthwhile thing. My wife laughed at me one time because it was 38 degrees and I put on all of these layers to go walking. And she said, "You're serious about walking?" And I said, "Yes." I said, "You're serious about walking too. I just happen to be serious about walking outside." And so I walked in 38-degree weather. Why? Because that thing was so in me, even though it was cold, I was not going to be happy unless I got those 6 miles in outside. The 38 degrees didn't matter anymore. Oh my God. I wish you would realize that when you get into this system, some external things that have held you back, they won't matter anymore because you'll be set up in this system of a cue, of a craving, a mega response, and then having that reward. Rewards can vary in their form, but they are essentially a thank you to yourself for learning and practicing a new habit. Now, here's what I tell people all the time. People used to ask me, they say, "Well, how often do you reward yourself with a cheat meal?" I would say to them, I don't understand the question. Now, I wasn't trying to be obnoxious, but I was trying to make a point. I know what people mean when they say a cheat meal. They mean a meal that is off of your eating plan. But here's what I tell people. If your eating plan represents the new you, why would you cheat you? I don't need to have a cheat meal when there are other things I can give myself as a reward that does not derail what I'm working on and who the new me I say I am. Okay? I'm going to let you sit with that one for a minute. I'm going to let you sit with that for a minute. See, I don't need a cheat meal. The new me doesn't need a cheat meal. The old me used to eat a pint of ice cream. The new me will take some blackberries and a small amount of fat-free whipped cream. It gives my brain the same sensation. Why? Because I trained myself to like it as much as I like ice cream. So I don't need to cheat myself. So a reward is not a reward if it's designed to derail or contradict with who you say you are. Oh my God. Woo. I don't get to say I'm celibate and I'm saving myself until marriage. But because I've been celibate for 6 months, I now go out and have sex because I rewarded myself. No, what you've done is derailed yourself. I don't get to say, well, I'm not going to drink alcohol anymore, but because it's my party, I got to turn up this one time. No, you're derailing who you say the new you are. That's going to be tough for people because people don't like that kind of language. They don't like that kind of accountability with themselves. But if you want to develop and form a new habit, a reward cannot be something you give yourself to derail who you are or who you are becoming. See, for instance, let's say that you feel great and you feel energized after this run we've been talking about. You put the shoes by the door. You looked in the mirror. You know why you need to do it. You've made yourself go do it, even if you couldn't do it as far the first time. Now you're running miles now, months into this. And you say, you know what? Once I'm able to run 5 miles, which was something that I was working up to. Once I ran 5 miles, you know what my reward was? I gave myself 4 ounces of apple juice. That was my reward. Somebody says, what? Yeah, because apple juice was not something that was on my daily list. It's something I could have, but it's something that I couldn't eat every day because of the way my body particularly processes juice or fruit. So after I ran my 5 miles and I got to the point where I could actually run 5 miles without stopping, once I got back to that point, I gave myself 4 ounces of apple juice. And it was delicious. It was amazing. It was good. And you know what I didn't do? Go back to drinking apple juice every day. So you got to give yourself something that's not going to cause you to, as people in AA say, fall off the wagon. I can't fall off the wagon. I got to reward myself with things that do not work against my goal. Why? Because I'm trying to create the endless feedback loop of habits. That's what I'm trying to create. These 4 steps form an endless feedback loop that is continually running through our brains, driving our behaviors. These habits become automatic because the loop continues. The loop becomes encoded in our neural pathways, making the responses more likely to occur when the cue is presented. That is the reason that some of you are so proficient on wigging out on people. Because the moment you perceive something as someone coming against you, that's your cue. You like, boom, that's my cue to go off. Boom, that's my cue to cuss them out. Boom, that's my cue to get them told. Your cue, your neural pathway has become so developed to get people told, to get them told off, to give them a piece of your mind because you have practiced this 4-step process. And you know what the reward is? You feel good when you cuss them out. You feel good when you go off. You get dopamine that is released into your system when you go off on somebody. And what that does is help to reinforce that loop. So you got to understand that if you want to break that system, you got to replace that old habit, come on somebody, with a new habit that will give you the same dopamine in your brain and in your system so that you can feel good about the new habit and therefore you can give up on the old habit. So that's what you got to do. Now, in order for you to implement, and we're almost done. If you got to go, you got to go. You can come back and pick this up later. In order for you to do that, there are laws that are involved in this, okay? There are laws that are involved in this. Again, when we talk about this endless feedback loop, here's what I wanted. I put this in my note. I said the endless feedback loop of habits. These 4 steps form an endless feedback loop that is continually running through our brains and driving our behaviors. But you need to also understand that there are also laws that govern behavior change. Now, what is a law? A law is a systematic process that works the same way all the time for everybody. For instance, you've heard of this, the law of gravity. Well, what is the law of gravity? The law of gravity says that if something goes up, it must come down. So it doesn't matter who you are. If you get on top of a 10-story building and you jump off of that 10-story building, you are not going to float if you're on Earth. Gravity works consistently. It works the same way all the time, day, night, rain, sleet, snow, black, white, male, female, tall, short, fat, skinny. Doesn't matter. You jump off that building, you're coming down. That law is established and is consistent, and it works for all of us. So what are the 4 laws that we need to look at then, if indeed we are going to be able to implement this cue, this craving, this response, and this reward process into our lives in order to build better habits? Here's what you're going to have to do. The first law is you got to do something known as making it obvious. Okay? You got to make it obvious. The second law is whatever the new habit's going to be, you got to make it attractive. Okay? And then after you make it obvious, after you make it attractive, then you're going to have to make it easy. And then lastly, number 4, you're going to have to make it satisfying. You're going to have to make it satisfying. Because if it's not satisfying to you, you won't stick to it. So let's look at number 1 real quick. What do I mean by make it obvious? To make a habit obvious, you start by identifying the cues we talked about that trigger your current habit. You use the habit or you use the strategy of something called habit stacking. Habit stacking. What is habit stacking? By adding a new habit onto an existing one, okay, I become more likely to repeat that habit. Let me help you. Maybe you say, I want to be a person who spends more time meditating. Okay? That's who I want to become. I want to become a person who spends more time meditating. What is a habit that you already have? Maybe your habit is when I get up in the morning, I always make me a cup of coffee. Okay? That's a habit that I do. I do it without even thinking. I'm stumbling around in the morning and I can go and with my eyes closed, reach up and grab the coffee out of the cabinet and put it in my Keurig and start it and put my cup. I can do it automatically. I don't even think about it. Some days I don't even remember doing it. Okay. It's a habit that I have formed. Well, habit stacking says you connect another habit to a habit you're already doing. It makes it much more likely for you to continue that habit. So your habit stacking could be, and these are just examples that you have to find your own. It could be after I pour my morning coffee, I spend 1 minute meditating while the coffee is brewing. I don't get on my phone. I don't speak to anybody. I don't do anything. All I do is spend 60 seconds meditating, practicing thankfulness, and thinking about what a great day I'm going to have. Okay? So you habit stack. And then what you do is you begin to design your environment to make those cues of good habits visible and accessible. Okay? So what do? If I know that I'm going to make coffee every morning, maybe I put a sticky note on my coffee at night that says, remember to meditate. Because at first, I might forget. I won't forget to make the coffee because I've been doing that consistently for the last 3 years every morning, Monday through Friday. But I haven't been meditating every day. So I have to make my environment such that I have a visible cue. And so I take a sticky note and I write the word meditate and I stick it on the coffee Keurig, right? Or near the stove or somewhere. I mean, you have to be safe about it. You don't want it to burn, but you put it somewhere so that when you get ready to make that coffee in the morning, you have a visible cue. And when you have a visible cue, now you're starting that endless loop we talked about of forming that next habit. Understand this, our environment significantly influences our behavior. So by arranging your surroundings to highlight potential cues of good habits, like maybe you want to drink more water, then you place your water bottle on your desk when it's time to work. Why? So you remember, oh, I need to drink some water. One of the things I do wherever I go, and I ain't trying to advertise for them, but I have water. Why? Because I know I need to drink more water. If water is out of sight, it's out of mind for me. But if it's in sight, then I drink water. Okay? You can make it so much easier to adopt and maintain these habits if you make it obvious. That is rule number 1. You have to make it obvious. And then rule number 2, you got to make whatever you do attractive. Why? Because we talked about dopamine just a minute ago, but dopamine plays a key role in habit formation. If you don't know it, spend some time and research it, what dopamine does as it relates to habits. But dopamine is a powerful key player in habit formation. Why? Because what it does is as dopamine is released, we're not just experiencing pleasure at the moment, but dopamine begins to get us ready to anticipate that pleasure. Okay? So now, I know it sounds crazy, but I used to see my running shoes by the door and think, oh, I got to go running. But now that I have formed that endless loop of habit formation, now I see my shoes and my body starts to go, oh man, we get to go running today. Or whatever your thing is, now dopamine is being released. It's giving you pleasure before you even do the thing. So it's pushing you toward the habit that you want to do so that you can become who you say you are, so you can continue to do it over and over and over and over again. That's what makes it attractive. That's what makes it attractive. The way I feel and the way I look makes eating the way I eat now attractive. I used to think I was going to die. Hear me. I thought I was going to die if I had to eat a meal that did not include meat, and sometimes multiple meats. I mean, I needed a chicken and a beef option. I mean, I needed seafood and something else. And when I got to the point where I even told myself on August the 1st, we are not going to eat meat. And I didn't even start off at 60. I said for at least 30 days. That's all I could fathom. I just knew I was going to pass out. That first week, I knew I was going to die. I just knew that I made sure my life insurance policy was up to date. My wife was the beneficiary. And, I just knew I was going to go. Why? Because I was so habit formed into eating meat with every single meal. Every single meal. But you know what I learned? You don't die. If you don't eat meat with every meal, you know what? You actually feel less bloated. You know what? You actually feel better. And then when I started incorporating those vegetables that I didn't really like as much, I started finding out that after about 21 days, your taste buds will change. And I used to hate cauliflower. And now I can eat it mashed. I can eat it air fried. I can eat it broiled. Listen, sometimes I will get me a whole head of cauliflower. Go home and cut it up, and it becomes the main source of my meal, and I enjoy it almost like I used to enjoy a steak. Now, I ain't there yet, but I'm going to keep forming this habit until it's as good. You understand what I'm saying? And so now I don't have to have meat with every meal. Why? Because I made what I was doing attractive, and that's what you got to learn to do. You got to learn to make it attractive. So for instance, maybe you hate doing laundry. I know a lot of people say that they hate it. I actually enjoy doing laundry. Weird, right? I enjoy washing. I enjoy drying. I enjoy folding. And I enjoy putting my clothes up. Okay. I don't put my wife's clothes up, but I do fold them, but she puts those up. But I enjoy doing laundry. You may say, Pastor Edwin, I hate it. I can't stand it. So habit stack. Find something enjoyable to do while you're doing the thing you have to do that's not that enjoyable. For instance, maybe you like listening to podcasts, like EdTalk with Pastor Strick. Maybe you could listen to this podcast over and over and over while you're doing your laundry. Because habit stacking will say, you know what? Whenever I have to do laundry, dopamine gets released and I get to listen to EdTalk. Yay! And so the dopamine will overweigh your to doing the laundry. And when you have it stacked, now you can listen to EdTalk podcast and do your laundry. And before you know it, even if you don't ever love doing laundry, it becomes easier for you because you've habit stacked it with 2 or 3 other things you've learned to do. I'm telling you, it works. It absolutely works. You got to learn to put into practice those things that we know from psychology and from brain work that works. So number 2, you got to make it attractive. Number 1, you got to make it obvious. Number 2, you got to make it attractive. Because if you don't, then these other 4 things we talked about, the cue, right? The craving, right? The response, right? The reward, they won't last. So you got to make the new habit obvious. You got to make it attractive. And number 3, you got to make it easy. A new habit should be started in a way or in a form that can be done in 2 minutes or less. I call this the 2-minute rule of habit formation. You want to develop a new habit? Make it easy. Make it easy. If you got to go through 15 or 16 different steps to do the new habit, you won't do it. You're going to quit. You're going to get tired of it. Absolutely. Lakeisha, absolutely had me in a stronghold. It did. But now I made it easy. I made it easy not to be in that stronghold anymore because I used this process. This is what I've been walking through since August. And I'm telling you, if you do it and implement it, whatever your area of life is you're looking to change, it'll work for you. Why do I like the 2-minute rule for habit formation process? Why do I like it? Because this rule helps to overcome the initial resistance that we all have to a new behavior by making it so easy that it's hard not to do it. Let me say it again. I love this rule because what this rule does for me and what it'll do for you is it helps us to overcome the initial resistance we have. And we have to admit we are initially resistant people when it comes to change. When it comes to change. When it comes to change, I don't care what it is, we are resistant to change for the most part because we don't want to have to develop a new habit. Because even bad habits have been formed neurologically, and even bad habits give us dopamine. And so we don't want to change. We don't want to do something new. It's the fear of the unknown. So if we're going to form this new habit, we got to make it obvious. We have to make it attractive, and we have to make it easy. Why? Because this 2-minute rule overcomes the initial resistance that we have to the new behavior we're trying to develop. And what it does is it makes it easy for us when it's actually a hard thing to do. Over time, what happens is these 2-minute starters, especially if you combine them with habit stacking, they evolve into a more comprehensive, naturally occurring habit, which becomes a skill in your life. But the key to building new habits is repetition, not perfection. The key to building new habit is repetition, not perfection. The more you do it, the more you'll build the habit. You don't have to be perfect every time you do it. Starting small and focusing on consistency is the key. That's what James Clear's book is all about. When he talks about atomic habits, that's what it's all about. Tiny behaviors that help establish the habit in your neural pathways that makes it easier to expand on these new habits that seem difficult at first that will become your norm over time. You gotta make it easy. Consistency, but you gotta make it easy. And then lastly, number 4, it's gotta be satisfying. I didn't say it had to be so easy that it didn't require effort, right? Because it's going to require effort, but effort in being easy aren't the same thing. Okay, I got to make it easy. I got to make it doable. But now I got to put forth some effort, because you don't get satisfaction out of something that you don't have to put effort into. So ensuring immediate satisfaction to reinforce a habit is crucial. What it does is it helps to reinforce the behavior, and it helps to make it more likely to be repeated. So you have to find ways to give yourself an instant reward after completing a habit to help encode it on your brain. So let's go back to this laundry thing, okay? You can't stand doing laundry. But if you don't pay somebody to do it, you got to do it. Or you got to make your kids do it. You got to supervise it, okay? Whatever the case may be. But let's say it's your responsibility to do the laundry for whatever reason in your household. But you don't like doing the laundry. So what you do is you say, you know what? I'm going to habit stack. I'm going to find something I like doing. Ooh, I like listening to EdTalk with Pastor Strick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to listen to his podcast while I'm doing the laundry. So I'm going to put it in and allow EdTalk to distract me from the of doing laundry. And while I'm doing this laundry and listening to EdTalk, by the time I get through listening to his broadcast, it's about an hour and 25 minutes right now, I'm going to be through at least with this first load that's done washing. And when I put this load into the dryer and EdTalk is done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something to reward myself. Maybe rewarding myself is I am going to go and spend 5 minutes on TikTok while the dryer is going. Just 5. I'm going to set my timer, and I'm going to spend 5 minutes on TikTok. And when I'm done, I'm going to go back and I'm going to find me another podcast, or I'm going to find a message to listen to, or I'm going to listen to 3 songs. I'm going to do something that is satisfying to me while I'm doing this thing, because it's going to help me over time develop this habit that when it's time to do laundry, dopamine is going to be released, because dopamine knows I get to do something satisfying, even though I may be doing a task that's not so exciting to me. And before you know it, doing laundry won't even bother you. You won't even think about it. You'll be like, that doggone Pastor Strick got me enjoying doing laundry. Actually, I got you enjoying habit stacking, doing the things you like to do when you do the thing you don't do. And in life, we all have to do some things we don't like to do sometimes. But there's a way to do it and get more done doing it when you build better habits. All right? Listen, I'm done for today, but I want to encourage you to go back and listen. I know it's a lot of information. I did my best to synthesize this. I was actually going to teach this as a master class. That was a 2-day class, because I've got so much more to say about building better habits. So much more about it. But I decided to interject it in here because I think it puts us on the right path for what we're going to talk about next week, which is how do you build better focus? Once you've decided who you want to be, once you decided the habits that's necessary to become who you want to be, once you understand the cue to becoming the person you want to be, once you understand how to create the craving, once you understand how you're able to give yourself that immediate kind of reward that you need because you had the right response, once you've done that and then you understand these 4 laws about how can I make this thing obvious, right? How can I make it attractive so that I want to keep doing it? And then how do I make it easy enough that I don't talk myself out of it? And then how do I use this law to make it satisfying? Once you've done that, now we can go to the next step, which says, how do I build my focus in such a way that execution becomes my lifestyle? Execution becomes my lifestyle, because I'm telling you, when you learn how to execute, there's a lot of people who can plan. There's a lot of people who can dream. There are a lot of people who can sit around and talk a good game, but can you execute? And I'm going to teach you next week how to execute. because there are principles, there are laws, there are studies, there's research, there's metadata out there that will teach you how to execute. And I've been spending the last couple of months getting ready to share this with you. And so I am literally giving you a free masterclass every week for the next 4 weeks. So you ought to join me. Tell your friends to join me. We'll be back here on next Tuesday, 12 Central Standard Time. And I'm looking forward to it. Share the broadcast if you haven't. Like the broadcast if you haven't. It helps me to get the word out. So thank you guys for joining me. I appreciate it. And I will check you guys all next week. All right. Have a good one.